AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Tracy Malone, is back with us today to talk about understanding your triggers. Tracy is a survivor of narcissistic abuse, an author, speaker, educator, and an emotional resilience coach. She is the founder of Narcissistic Abuse Support, a global resource to victims of emotional abuse, which offers support to those trying to break the ties with the narcissists in their lives. Welcome back to AVAIYA, Tracy.
Hi there. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. Always so great to have you. And I love your topic today. It's such a great one. So let's talk triggers. So this is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days. What is a trigger to you, and why is it so important that we understand our triggers in order to heal?
Sure. So triggers happen to us all the time, right? I mean, if we don't understand them, we will continue to be triggered and triggered and triggered, and it disrupts your life. If you can envision your Tupperware cabinet for a moment, and I'm thinking of mine that I just told my son he has to clean this weekend because we just start to shove things. Like it goes really organized and then things just get pushed in. And when you open it, everything falls out, right? That's how a trigger is. You don't know when it's going to fall out because it's for the Tupperware closet, as I'm describing. You're like, oh, I can get that lid in. I don't know, maybe, so you're just putting all these emotions in and you never know when they're going to fall out. Triggers are a feeling that you get that is correlated to some kind of trauma in your life. If we think about something like a scar on your body, right? If you have a scar and you go, yeah, when I cut my hand and got that scar, I was like emotional. Oh my God, this is what happened. And you have all these emotions attached to that scar. A year later, 5 years later, yeah, I cut myself, blink. It's not got the attachment of the emotions. When you have been in an abusive situation, these emotions get attached to memories. And so we have to start to understand and untangle why I'm being triggered. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it. Great analogies there. And I love that you mentioned the Tupperware cabinet, because I had to laugh, because isn't that like something that so many people can relate to? Their Tupperware cabinets just be like busting full of stuff, and the lids are over here and everything's all in disarray. Our 13-year-old AVAIYA/Ava, she also is in charge of managing the Tupperware container. And I'm also glad that you said Tupperware, because I say that too, even though I don't really have Tupperware anymore.
I know, exactly. I think they'll always be in our mind for that sort of thing. Yeah. It is something that we can understand because we all have that. And again, it starts out real neat and clean and lasts for maybe a month. And then, we got to start shoving things in, right? And that's how emotions are. And when we've been in abusive relationships, they are all over the place. And so anything can trigger you, like a place, a smell. If you think about, why do realtors like bake cookies before an open house? Because it's a trigger of happiness and good times, right? But triggers can also be reminders of scary and horrible things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so are there different types of triggers? You kind of just mentioned, right? There can be positive and negative. Anything else?
Sure. So triggers can trigger emotions, anger, stress. We can feel unsafe. We can feel all kinds of, depression. They can trigger us to be sad because it's not necessarily the thing that's happening right now. It's the thing that happened in the past that we associate with that emotion. Just like the scar, that happened in the past, but the emotions, we dropped them. We left them back when we hurt ourselves. Now with an emotional trigger, again, some of them are going to trigger you to get really angry. Some are going to be stress. Some are going to be depression, shame triggers, right? If someone does something, you could just go into this shame bubble where you're just crawled up in a ball, but it might not be the event you're at right now or whatever happened. It's the layers of that shame that perhaps you've had since childhood, or in my case with narcissists, where they have shamed you and blamed you. And so it just attaches to it. And until we learn to like separate them, like pull apart the Velcro, it's very hard to process. So it's calendar events, it's sounds, it's music. There's so many different ways a trigger can come to us, but then they do something. They create that emotion, the anger, the sadness, the anxiety, whatever it is. The fear. We can have fear triggers, right?
Yes, absolutely. And how does someone know when they're being triggered? Like, how do they be aware of, oh, wow, I'm triggered right now?
Well, again, it's starting to learn to untangle them, right? We might not know, oh my gosh, I'm triggered, but all of a sudden you're just raging mad, or you're completely depressed and want to go under the covers, and you don't really understand why. If you can understand that someone did something that brought that trigger back, then we can start to dissect the parts to understand it. I use this little ball when I talk to my clients, and I'm like, this is the event, right? This is whatever happened. So someone ghosted you and it upsets you, right? And then you get an emotion. The emotion could be anger, could be sadness, could be stress, whatever we have there, right? So we have the trigger, the thing that happened, and we have the emotion. And I say, but why did you choose anger? Why are you angry? And they're like, because they did this little red ball. And it's not that. We have to look farther and deeper, because that's the emotion that we chose. It's not the reason underneath the trigger.
Gotcha. And so how do we figure that part out? Like, how do you know what the real, like the root cause of that trigger is?
Right. So I have a worksheet that we're going to hand out to people, which actually lays out 9 steps to dissecting what is behind the why behind your triggers. Because again, if you are with someone who pushes your triggers, pushes your buttons, they know exactly how to get to you. And so understanding the why behind it is absolutely vital, because again, it's historical, right? If it's hysterical, it's historical. It means we've had it before, and triggers are the perfect example of that. But it's things like feeling excluded, powerless, feeling unheard, feeling judged, feeling blamed, feeling like the bad guy, feeling forgotten, right? All of these, feeling unsafe. I felt unsafe when you ghosted me. I felt unloved when you ghosted me. So I got angry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's digging into this why, this reason that is much more than just this one. Again, like the Tupperware, it's just every time someone blames me, it reminds me of when my family did it, right? Oh, that's 1 + 1. I'm figuring out the pattern. Now we have to look at, how do I feel when this happens? How do I feel it in my body? Again, that anxiety, the fear, the depression, where am I feeling it? Is it here in my stomach? Is it in my throat? Do I get all angry? Where do I feel it? How do I react? And then learn your coping skills for how you react. If you're going to always be rageful when someone does this, or, internalize it and go inside into like a fight, a freeze mode, and be like, I'm just going to be disconnected. I just feel lost. I'm hopeless. And all of those sort of things. So we need to understand that pattern, then understand our body, how we feel it, and then move to the next piece, which is, okay, the why is here. And I see that it's not just this time, but it trickles down from something else. And then we address that. If it is something of, I'm feeling I'm feeling unloved, or, like that I am unsafe in this particular situation, well, then we can address healing that. We have to understand how we feel it. We have to understand where we feel it, how we, like, again, everyone does things differently with triggers. Maybe a nice relaxing bath might be what soothes that nervousness or something like that. You have to have a strategy in your mind. I always feel better when I blank. And so when you have that and you empower yourself to that, and you see that it's not just this event, we can start to demystify some of the historical stuff. and then we gain more control over it, and we'll still get triggered. Don't think they don't come, but it's a 5-second. Okay, I see. I feel like I couldn't speak up. Now I get it. It's not just this, oh God, there's this umbrella over my event that is just crippling me. There's a reason, and I can understand it.
And do you, like, for most of the people that you work with, do you find them tracing their triggers all the way back to childhood most of the time? Or are there a lot of people that really don't have a lot of triggers based in their childhood, a bit more so like adult relationships?
It really depends on the situation. I coach people who are victims of narcissistic abuse. Generally, if they're in a relationship, then there's probably a chance that they were in the relationship because they didn't recognize it because they grew up with it. Right. So, but there are people that had a perfectly fine, normal childhood. And then the narcissist or abusive person starts to trigger you. So it's attached to that event, not necessarily the historical, but that still could be, if they gaslight you and you feel trapped over and over, you could have 20 times of that with the new narcissist without the family historical part.
Got it. Yeah. Interesting. And is there a way to actually turn off the triggers? Can we accomplish that?
Well, again, they're going to happen, right? It's do we want it to last for 4 days, or do we want it to last 15 minutes, right? By going through the process of this worksheet that we're going to give out, they will be able to identify and go, okay, this is what it was. This is the feeling behind it. This is the emotion behind it. And I can see where I had this. That's one of the things is it just now? No. When do I remember feeling this as a child, right? When you go through the process of understanding, yeah, I always felt that, when I first started to date this person, or I can remember back when this happened, or it doesn't have to be a dating. It could be my sister triggered me, right? It could be anybody at work that is triggering an emotion that has nothing to do with work, right? If they're sitting there telling you that, oh, you don't get to come into this meeting. We're all, we don't need you today. Then you felt excluded, which might be how you felt with your family. So it can trickle into any part of your life. And you don't even need to have a narcissist in your life. It's just these feelings of not being loved or not being accepted, things not being fair. If we look at those sort of things, they just excluded me. Okay. And how do we process that? We process it instead of run from it. Most people don't want to look at it. They just go, and they go, I just got this anger over my head. And it's just a big umbrella that they haven't figured out. If you're with a therapist or a coach, they would talk you through this to get you to this point of understanding it. So that's kind of what the worksheets will do. And how we turn them off is to process them. If they are ping-ponging in our head every single day, they're just going to keep bouncing around, right? It's when we grab one of the ping pong balls and go, let me look at this. Let me understand what's going on here, that we get our power back. And, we can heal from this. We can heal a wound, because if you look back to, you had the scar, you fell out of the tree, your brother pushed you, you broke your arm, and you went to school the next day, you're like, oh my God, you have all this emotion. A year later, I've got this scar. My brother pushed me out of a tree. We are capable of leaving the emotion back with that memory when we process it, right? If we don't process it, it's going to come along every time we feel powerless, unheard. It's going to snap back and we're going to go, what's going on here? So really being the master of your triggers is going to help you heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so amazing, right? That the human body, we're designed to process whatever happens, the trauma, and then be able to move forward for our own survival, right? And yet so many of us experience these things in childhood, when during childhood, processing certain things without the help of someone is pretty hard, So it's no wonder that we're right. So many of us have these triggers that we just never let cycle through, process, or whatever when we were little.
Absolutely. And it's just part of life, right? We attach these emotions to an event, and part of the demystifying in this worksheet is to really look at, when do I remember this happening? And, what was the situation, and how did I feel then? And I have all the lists of all the feelings you could have, and go, oh my God, there's 7 feelings. When someone does this, I get all this stuff. And then it becomes that mountain that pushes you down into the quicksand. Mm-hmm. So really demystifying it is going to be the key.
Do you see people, I'm thinking like of like the abandonment trigger, right? People who are afraid of being abandoned. Do you see that come up a lot in your work? And do you have any suggestions for people who have that?
Absolutely. Abandonment work is like one of my favorite topics. It is absolutely vital that because it's a fear, right? It's abandonment, but it's a fear of abandonment, right? And so the fear of being left or nobody loving me or being all alone, we have to look at that as well, right? Abandonment is a huge thing for people to heal because it makes us make decisions. I know that I made decisions on my relationships now that I'm healed and went through this work, that I was afraid I was going to be abandoned. And I thought I picked people subconsciously till I did the work that wouldn't abandon me, right? So it's sort of like, if we go into it with that as the criteria for finding a mate, oh, they won't abandon me. Like, it's not the right way to do it. So you have to put that and understand that and go through the process. Every one of the different types of triggers, again, it can trigger that abandonment wound. It can trigger your anxiety. It can trigger depression because you got depressed when something happened when you were younger.
Yeah, that's a big one that is plagued me in my own life. So I understand it in a personal way too. And then another one I'm curious about is, do you work with people who have like, it's more like a perfectionistic kind of trigger, as in they can't make a mistake or right there, or maybe someone will leave them or what have you. Does that come up with your people you work with?
Of course. The fear of making a mistake and then they'll leave me is all one sentence, right? If I don't do this, or if I shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I had just done that, then they wouldn't leave me, right? So getting to a point to understand the root of that is also absolutely vital, because those kind of fears are going to cripple you. They are going to make you make decisions based on those fears, and fears are easy to conquer. Fears take work, but you need to you have to look at it. It's not like, oh, let me go talk about what happened. No, how did you feel? Let's go deeper, deeper, deeper. And then they can open up and find some hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad that you strung that all into one sentence, because those two triggers do come together a lot, right? If I do this wrong, if I say this wrong, if I make a mistake, then yes, these people or this person or whatever will abandon me and I'll be all alone. So yeah.
It's very much connected in my narcissistic world. It's very much connected to the perfectionism and people pleasing and codependency are based on trying to make others happy so that we aren't the one that does something wrong, right? That we have sort of like, again, they're not going to leave me if I do everything right. And if it's a family member and we're just struggling with, I don't care if they leave me, I want them to go, right? At the same time, we still have to deal with those emotions. It's not easy to just go no contact with someone that you love. And so going through the process, I'm working on a journal for the process to decide if you're going to go no contact with someone, because we have to look at things before we just go, yes, I'm going no contact with someone. Yeah, well, now you're going to be struck with all these emotions if you think them through beforehand and go, how does this implicate to my children, and what happens they don't have grandma anymore? So many things to consider, but the triggers that we're talking about tie into almost everything when we talk about healing.
Yeah, that's a really good example, because I know, yes, a lot of people watching or listening might be in that journey right now or wondering if they should go no contact. So yeah, absolutely. Great. A really smart way of looking at it and really kind of thinking it through ahead of time and how it affects everybody. Is there anything else you could say around like divorce or breakups, since I know that's something that you've recently written a book about? So like, do you see certain triggers flare up for people when they're actually getting a divorce from someone who's narcissistic, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, because it becomes a battle. It is beyond a battle. It is a war. And, they go through so many emotions from, losing themselves to feeling powerless and being triggered, because the narcissist knows exactly what your triggers are. They know exactly what you're sensitive about, and whether it's calling you a bad parent, you're a good parent, so you're going to fight it, right? Whatever they're going to attack you with is going to be the weapon of choice with a divorce. And so people are triggered constantly, and the court system all by itself has like trigger crazy, right? It is just, why do we have to wait so long? Why won't my lawyer call me back? What do I do now? And there's so much. Why won't they give their paperwork? How come I have to give paperwork and they won't give me paperwork, right? It just becomes a trigger nightmare. And again, the narcissist in this divorce case that we're talking about knows exactly how to get to you, and by calling you names and shaming you to say you're a bad parent, and threaten you. So they feel unheard, they feel blamed, they feel like they can't speak up, they feel like the bad guy, they feel unsafe. Those are all underneath everything to do in a divorce. And again, getting through it is not easy, but it is possible. And with guidance, instead of learning about narcissists more, it starts to like, when do we learn about healing? How do I start healing? And some people are like, I'm in the middle of the trauma and the drama of court. I can't possibly heal till it's over. But that often is a mistake, because the strength that you would gain to be in the battle versus after the battle is what you would, you'd have a jump on healing, because you've learned to not let these triggers bother you. If you are triggered every single day by lawyers, judges, and your ex, or they're turning the kids against you, you're going to be a mush of all kinds of things. You're not going to be able to help yourself. So getting that help earlier is going to help a lot.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point, Tracy. I love it. And I love that you mentioned, right, like something along the lines of, right, we can learn a lot about like narcissistic red flags and what to watch out for and what to be aware of. But yeah, we can also learn a lot about healing. And that's a very good thing to focus on if that's you. I love that.
That's what this whole summit is about, right? How do we heal? And triggers is part of it. There's so many different wounds. To me, that's how we heal, is we look at not just them and where you are, but, oh gosh, I might have that abandonment wound. I've got to deal with shame and guilt. I'm not sure how to trust again, right? We look at the wounds and then we heal those, and then we get stronger.
Gotcha. Yeah. And also great to mention all of the things that can come up for someone in a legal situation. Cause yeah, what an interesting experience, that can be for people. And so many, even just the little things like you mentioned, just paperwork and this, that, and the other, it can be extremely stressful. So just, making sure that people watching, if that's your experience right now, that practice that self-care. You need to be, working through this in your own healing. So
absolutely. Self-care is key. Getting the right help is key. And then not being stuck on just learning. I've had people 2 or 3 years later saying, yeah, I watch a video every single day. And I'm like, but you're through it. Are you watching videos on trust and healing and this, or are you sitting there watching someone else's holiday be ruined and then going, oh, right, mine was ruined. Well, 2 years later, yeah, it was ruined, but you're holding on to it. You've got to learn to let go of the emotions that these videos can bring up, because the more you sit there, you're living in yesterday. You're not living in tomorrow. We need to move them to the healing part quicker, because 2 years in that place, unless you're still in the battle, you're doing yourself a huge disservice.
Yeah. Yes. Good point. Thank you for mentioning that. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about your worksheet, your free gift that you are giving out to people today. And there's a button below everyone that links over to it. So tell us about it.
So it is a very pretty handout that is finding the why behind your emotional triggers. And it does take you through those 9 steps of identifying the emotions, identifying the whys, looking at the history of it, looking at how your body does react to it, how you soothe your body. And that takes you through. And then there's a little Mad Libs at the end where you're fill in the blanks. When someone does this, I always feel this way. And this is how I soothe myself. And you just sit there and go, this is the why. And now I understand it. And by journaling about it and getting it out, you are going to be able to close the door on that ping pong ball. There'll be another one tomorrow, but it just wants to be processed too. I created a little trigger handbook. It is a little journal diary that has exactly what's in there on the worksheets, but then it gives you that spot to put it all in one place. I love the idea of, this is my trigger journal. Anytime someone triggers me, I'm going to pick it up, and it's going to be cute too. I was like, why do they have to be ugly triggers? No, they're beautiful books you want to pick up and go, I want to process this. And all the instructions are in the beginning, just like you'll get on the worksheet. So you can use your own notebook with the worksheets. But again, just remember to go back to it. Every time you get triggered, go, oh, I've got to process this. That's going to help people a lot.
Yes, I love that. And thank you for making them beautiful. That's a good point. So thank you for that. And also, can you share a little bit about your book? We talked about it a little bit a few minutes ago, but can you share a little bit more about what that is?
I'll hold it up. It is Divorcing Your Narcissist. You can't make this shit up. Bleep. But it is 335 pages that are going to take you through the emotional path, dealing with fear, dealing with your anger, strategies. I have thousands of people who donated their stories, and I shortened them up to be this into different types of tricks. So, kind of like financial tricks with the kids, whatever it is. I've got them all listed out, but it's not just, oh gosh, this could happen. It is to prepare you. This could happen, and here's what you do to avoid it. Like, that's an important discernment from, like, I don't want to read a whole bunch of stories of terrible things, but I want to know that this is possible. And if I'm aware, I can prepare. If I have no idea this is going to happen, like I didn't, you are blindsided. And again, trigger, and you become immobilized. You go into freeze mode and you can't get out. So I wanted it to be helpful. I have 26 authors and therapists and psychologists, mediators, lawyers that gave their top tips as well. So it's kind of this compilation, as well as all these different strategies. And I put two pieces in there that pretty much I think are the most important things. I have the rich and the poor narcissist, because in divorce, it matters. Because a rich one's going to go after you this way, a poor one's going to go after your stuff that way, right? And then I have a part in the back called the gray areas of a divorce decree. Most people, like, you get them this Christmas, I get them next year. That's reasonable. And a lawyer will be like, you won, you got it, shut up, but that doesn't like help with a narcissist. Everything has to be very, very detailed. Christmas starts at 9:00 on Christmas Eve, and you get them till 8:00 the next morning. If you don't have those specific details, and again, I've got stories where, say, on this case in the book, the husband picked up the kids for Christmas and didn't bring them back for 2 weeks because it didn't say when. So the wife is calling the police, we won't bring back my children. And the police look at the decree and go, ma'am, it doesn't say when, so I can't enforce anything. So if they're supposed to pay you money, how much, when is it? Because if you've got a date, then you're protected. If it says 60 days, they'll pay you. Well, I don't know when that started, sir. I didn't know. And now you're taking them back to contempt of court for $20,000. So all of those things are in there.
Wow. That's super helpful. So I appreciate you sharing about that for anyone going through that journey or potentially going through the journey in the future. So thank you for all of this. And everyone, links are below to everything. Do you have any last insights before we wrap up?
Triggers are manageable. You can get through this, but, not understanding them is going to cripple you. See how the lightness appears. It's possible. And we just have to learn to process and figure out the why. Why is this bothering me? It's not the anger I have to worry about. It's all the other stuff.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay, always good to see you, Tracy. And thank you, AVAIYA students watching or listening right now, for showing up for yourself so courageously on this journey. And we will see you all again very soon. Take care. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this latest class with Tracy Malone. She was back with us today to talk about understanding your triggers. I absolutely love that Tracy talked about this today, since triggers that's a huge buzzword. It's something that a lot of us hear left and right. We have trigger warnings. We talk about what triggers us, all of those kinds of things. And I think my favorite part of the conversation was when we talked about turning off our triggers. Can we actually turn them off? And we talked about it not necessarily like you can turn them off and they go away, although maybe some do over time if you keep working at them. But right, she mentioned that, do you want it to last for 5 minutes or do you want it to last for 5 days, right? Do you want this trigger to take you over for a short period of time, and then you process it and work through it and recognize where it's actually coming from, why it's actually a trigger for you, what events in the past, which a lot of time come from our childhood, are triggering us up here on the timeline of our life in our adult relationships, right? So going back to those and processing those so that you can get over that trigger and let it go and let go of all those emotions in a few minutes, as opposed to it takes you down for 5 days, for 10 days, for a month, what have you. So I thought that was a very powerful way of looking at it. So I hope you enjoyed this class. If you did, Tracy has been featured in numerous other AVAIYA University masterclasses, and you can find her at the homepage of avaya.com and those other classes. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.